The thing that hooks me and makes me remember is when it has a strong story to it, something that resonates with us.
It raises questions, it makes us cry, it challenges us. It's what we don't expect that makes it a surprise to us.
We haven't come up with a better word for film yet, even though most people don't use celluloid film anymore. But the way we look at filmmaking and why we still call our department film is because we're telling stories visually.
We're telling the truth under the circumstances of the story. So if you can find that truth and impart that, people will feel it.
A lot of the class is focused on the students developing their voice, and my job is to help them do what they want to do and realize their vision in the most effective way possible.
We currently have 3 tracks of study, which is cinematography, editing, and directing. And for the first year or so, people take mostly the same classes, but then we start to diverge and people take different classes depending on their discipline.
Half of the class is more of a technical aspect of filmmaking and cinematography, and then the other half of the class is a producing period where every week we shoot a project.
My directing philosophy would probably be know every aspect of the set, whether it's first AC, directing, ADing, cinematography. You kind of are able to say something and nobody questions you because they know you know exactly what you're talking about.
One advantage of having a film school in LA is that you're where the business is. The other advantage is that you can get faculty that's currently working, which is pretty hard to do in other locations.
And it was a bit overwhelming at first, but I realized that these were people that I was going to be able to work with and learn from.
They know what's going on and they know what's going to go on. They introduce us to the reality of what we're stepping into.
It's just great to see that they've gone through what we're going through and they've made it.
Their war stories are not 10 years old, they're like 10 minutes old. And they're facing the same challenges that the film students are going to be facing as soon as they hit the business.
When I've had the opportunity, I've had my students come visit my sets. They've really gotten to see what I'm doing in the moment that I'm doing it, and then we can come back and talk about it. I think that's invaluable.
Just to be able to put ourselves in that mindset and to be around all these mentors as teachers and things like that, that's what helps us evolve.
We want the transition between being in school and being a professional to be completely transparent without any friction whatsoever. And we've had a great deal of success doing that. When they hire ArtCenter people to come on the crew, they just step right into it. They know exactly what they're doing. They act like professionals. They don't fumble around.
The learning curve is super quick, but you get there quick and you kind of know where the professional level is at.
Filmmaking is a humbling profession. The whole notion that you're talented and that's what makes you a good filmmaker is a little bit of a misconception. I think that the people who work the hardest usually are the best filmmakers.
You want to be able to take something away from it. It's a message, something positive, something that you can take and grow from.
The most important thing, I think, is an interesting life. Building that personal brand, which may sound very commercial or reductive, but it's really about knowing who you are and putting yourself into your work, because that ultimately is what will appeal to people.
Come to the class or come to the work with alacrity, with the kind of cheerfulness and joy and gratitude to be here. When you bring that in, I think it infuses everybody, oh, I just got goosebumps. It infuses everybody on the set, and they want to do their best.
Students, if they're making films from their heart, they're usually going to be better than if they're making films that are trying to meet other people's expectations. If you have enough passion and you love films enough, you can't help but make a great film.
So we're very proud of our program at ArtCenter. As one of the instructors said, we're in Los Angeles. It's an easy drive for professionals. And so basically everybody who works in the film departments does 1 or maybe 2 classes, and they have a professional life otherwise, so that they can mentor the students, they can tell them what it's like to actually be doing this, and we're seeing over and over again that our students are able to transition in relatively quickly. So, in order for me to judge how badly any jokes will bomb today, how many people know English, and how many people will be using translation? English. Okay, well, I'll get a laugh or 2 then. This is good. Everybody else will wing it. So some ground rules, which is why I have the chair backwards. I'm jet lagged, I'm jacked up on coffee, and I have no attention span. So prepare for this, and we'll have a good time together. As I mentioned, we do have a lot of Chinese students coming to ArtCenter and to the film department. This has been great, and as a general rule, they're super talented, really hardworking, and it's just another way that we can all make movies together. So another thing that I believe will make you all happy is we're done with the slides. Unless they're really well done like my colleagues, I die a little inside when I see a PowerPoint presentation about to start. We're going to talk to each other. We're going to, like in a script, there's description and there's dialogue. So today we're going to have a little dialogue. We're going to talk together. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Going to keep it short because it's boring, except to me. And the reason I'm going to tell you a little background is because what we're going to talk about today is how in America, filmmaking has really changed in the past few years, and it's a great opportunity to do things differently than we had been doing it, and it's a great opportunity to work with people all over the world. So, for instance, as what will be my case study here today that we'll talk a little bit about, for the first time in my whole life, I'm working on a movie that's in post-production now that was independently financed, wildly international cast and crew, and it's completely different than the quote studio system that most people my age and older had been in for many years. So this, as you guys say in China, opportunity, crisis, same thing. It was a crisis in Hollywood, but now we're doing things differently. So even a movie like Rush Hour, this was a studio movie. It was made by New Line, Warner Brothers. It was financed and marketed and distributed by an American company, and even though it was Q, and we had, we had Jackie and the East Meets West and everything, this was still an American movie. So this new thing that I'm going to tell you about is a very interesting new way of doing business. So back in the old days, I should ask, has anybody here worked in the, quote, American film business with the studios like Warner's or Paramount or anything like that? Anybody done that? So I see a couple of hands. Few people won't admit it. So you got paid on time, I hope. I never do. Up until about the year 2009, the studios did business the way they'd been doing business for a very long time. They had a discretionary fund of a lot of money. Writers would come in, they'd tell them a story. The studio would say, I like it. Have your agent call me. I'm going to give you a boatload of money, and you go write it. And usually, you would get your boatload of money late, but then they wouldn't make the movie. And so great for writers, great for producers who were developing material, not so good for the movie business because it wasn't very efficient. So that way of doing business changed because of a confluence of events, some of which are very relevant to you guys as filmmakers in another country, which is that all at the same time we had the worldwide financial meltdown, the home video market, DVDs and all that kind of thing, that was supporting the film business in America as like a subsidy. It's like you could make a bad movie, but there was so much money coming in from home video, it didn't matter. You were going to make money no matter what. Also, there was a strike with the Writers Guild, which is a union that represents all the writers. So there was the stoppage in the business. And when that happened, and when the meltdown happened, and when the home video market died, and when there was a huge uptick in the percentage of overall money coming into a movie from the international market, which is why it's relevant to you guys. China is about to become the largest film market in the world. You'll have the largest box office. It's right about even with ours. It keeps going up. And so back when I was in film school in the old days, you took a movie and you looked at how much money it made. About 80% of the money it made was from American theatrical box office. And everything, you know, the other 20 was from everything else. That's flipped. Now it's 80% international box office, 20% American. So that changes the kind of movies that the studios are going to make, right? It's like if the studios were making romantic comedies and they really depended on, you know, how people behave in New York City and you're not getting the jokes, those don't play overseas, so all of a sudden they don't make financial sense anymore. Same thing with what we call mid-level dramas, which are movies that don't have big special effects and what have you. Also, one other additional thing to this whole big change is that, I don't know about you guys, but everybody's like, home video is getting better and better and better, and so it's like, why go to a theater when I can watch all this stuff at home? So, all of these things together, 2008, 2009, studios completely changed the way they do business. Now, we're in that new world, which is that most of the movies that the studios make are what they call tent poles, or big, it's like if you can imagine a tent. And there's a pole here and a pole here holding up the whole tent. They call tent pole movies those handful of poles that basically hold up the whole financial success of the movie business. So, Marvel movies, or big action comedies with a lot of action, DC movies, things like that, they're going to play well everywhere, and they're going to get people into a theater because they're big, they're cool looking, stuff blows up, and so the studios would rather make one $200 million film than 10, $20 million films, because even though your risk is all on one project, your reward is humongous. So that's why you guys are seeing so many of these kind of movies, is because they play all over the place. So I'm going to take a little water. I would also ask that even though we're going to have a Q&A session later on, if anybody's got a question or a comment, please shout it out. Because that way I'm not just lecturing to everybody, especially since we have a hall full of people who are already doing this. So in the context of what I just described, which is a movie business that for many years, many of us made a very good living doing a certain kind of thing, we now find that that's pulled out from under us. What do? Well, we make independent movies, and we make movies that are going to play all over the world, hopefully. So I'm working on one right now that I'm going to tell you a little bit about, and I think it's a very good case study of where the movie business is going. And again, change comes along. In fact, one of the things we always say at ArtCenter to our instructors is, if you're teaching the same thing for more than 3 years, you're doing it wrong, because everything is changing. There's certain fundamentals like, you know, storytelling, how you work with actors, that kind of thing. Those will never change, but in terms of the technology, it just shut itself off. In terms of the technology, it's constantly changing. In terms of the business, it's constantly changing, so we try to keep up with it. So another show of hands, how many people here have made a theatrical motion picture as a writer, a director, or a producer? Show of hands. Have actually been through this? I see some people. All right, so big surprise. It's really hard to do, and it's really hard to do well. And it's a little easier to do if you can throw money at the problem. If Warner Brothers is financing your movie, and you need a certain amount of days, and you need a big star, and you need to blow up a city block, they'll pay for it. It becomes a lot harder when you don't have money to throw at a project, because then you have to throw ingenuity at a project. And movies are one of the very few commodities where no matter how much they cost to make, they cost the same amount to go see. So Avatar or Batman versus Superman, which cost in excess of $200 million, in America still costs $12 to go see. Some movie that one of my students made that's in a theater now, that he made for $200,000, still costs $12 to see. So he had to be very innovative and smart and clever in order to get his movie up there, because the other guys who had an enormous, task in front of them to make a huge movie like that, did at least have a lot of money, and there's a lot to be said of that. So just as a few more little frames of reference, I know they mentioned Rush Hour here, which I like to call the gift that keeps giving. I wrote it in 1995. It got made in 1998. They made 3 movies, 1 TV show. I'm keeping track. 2 good movies, 1 not so good movie. TV show, not so good. What are you going to do? Hopefully, any of you who are in touch with Jackie Chan, tell him, let's do number 4, buddy. That would be really nice. Funny thing is, after Rush Hour, I was in a great position where they said, oh yeah, he's the guy who wrote that movie that has Jackie Chan in it. He must know everything about China and everything. And I was just a Jackie Chan fan. So, but the nice thing is I got to work with other people from China. I got to work with John Woo. I got to work with Sammo Hung. I got to work with a lot of other people who were really cool, all because of that one movie. So sometimes being typecast is not a bad thing. Some of the other movies, we were just talking about Jackie's new movie, Skip Trace, which I think is coming out, right? This way, was I'm looking forward to. Looks a little like Rush Hour. We take it as a compliment. The director of that movie is a guy from Finland named Rennie Harlin, and I worked with him on a movie called Cliffhanger with Sylvester Stallone. You guys know that movie? Awesome. For those of you who want to be writers, I'm going to tell you a very valuable story that I learned on Cliffhanger, because it was one of my, I had been writing specs for a while, but it was one of my first big studio movies. And at the time, Sylvester Stallone was like one of the biggest stars in the world. I was just starting out. The studio hired me to rewrite this script. It was an original script by a friend of mine named Mike France, who also wrote GoldenEye. And so we were supposed to fix it. It was too expensive, this and the other thing. And so I'm a young guy. Stallone's a big star. We're working together. There's no connection, right? Not much eye contact. He's a little dismissive. And I thought, okay, he's a big star. I'm an unknown writer. And then one day, there was a scene in the movie where he's like, remember it's up in the mountains, it's really cold, and it's like a frozen lake. And the bad guys are like chasing him across the lake. And he falls into the water. And in the script, he gets back out and he keeps running. So I says to him, we can't do that. In real life, it's like 40 below. You'd be all wet. You'd get up. You'd freeze to death. So he's like, yeah, all right, yeah, good point. What am I going to do? So I said, I got it figured out. You come up out of the cold water, and I looked this up online, it's true. You strip your clothes off, and your body would steam for a moment because of the difference between the temperature. And the look on his face was so awesome, because he went, nude? I'm naked? I'll do nude. That's great. And he got really excited. And the screenwriter goes, duh, this is a guy who's in really great shape. He works out 8 hours a day. The whole movie is a snow movie where he's wearing a big coat. I accidentally figured out a way for him to show off the fact that he works out all the time. So, changed the entire relationship. I was like, hey, yeah, come on, this guy told me I got to be nude, you know. Yeah. And so I took that with me as a really valuable lesson, which is when you're writing for a star, go with the star's strength. And actually, I had a great time working with him. He's very, very smart, and he would sometimes figure out script stuff like in a really fast, smart way, and I'm just like, well, I guess that's why he gets $13 million, and I get a percentage of $13 million, so it's a good thing. But writers, directors, keep that in mind when you're working with a star. So I'd like to talk, as I'm getting to this new movie, a little bit about the way movies are made in the big picture, because somebody said yesterday it's an incredibly complex, fraught with surprises, messy process. But like any other process, if you have certain methodologies, and if you have certain things built around that, then hopefully those surprises will be a little less than what they would be if you just go with chaos. And I think the American film business can speak to that in some ways, because for all of its many, many flaws, we've been doing it for about 100 years, and we've had a tendency to kind of stick with what has been working. And even in the independent world, we're trying to hang on to those things, if for no other reason than to just keep the chaos down a little. So, for instance, we always talk about, oh, there's new technologies, you know, everything's easier to do. It's not easier to do. It's just, in some instances, faster, in many instances, cheaper. Shooting on a digital camera may be cheaper because you're not paying for film, but what you shoot and how you shoot it is no different than what people were doing 100 years ago. Same thing with post-production. You don't have to like physically cut pieces of film, but you still have to make the decision. Where do I want this cut to be? What am I trying to say? What's my story? So my point to why I'm bringing this up is we've tried to build an infrastructure and a methodology around this to kind of keep things under control. We have a motion picture and television business that, unlike many motion picture and television businesses in the world, is not subsidized by the government or anything. It's a big scramble. There are privately held companies or corporations that bring the money to this. There are outside companies that bring money to it. But then, since we want it to be sustainable, we try to have something built up that allows us to do this. So, for instance, we have labor unions, and there are many flaws to this. I'm in a labor union. Most of everybody I work with labor unions. For all the problems that come along with that, it gives a structure to the people who are going to do this for a living. Because without having artists who can depend on this for their lifestyle, you're not going to be able to have the best people. We find that sometimes when we go shoot, like in other parts of the country, where we'll bring in our key people. Is there enough local crew around to help us out? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So we found it to be very important to have that structure. And now, however it's done in other countries, it's fine, but the key thought behind it is make movies and television a sustainable industry for the people who are going to work in it. So another thing that is very important is the whole structure of, the whole business structure, for lack of a better word. It's like show business. One of its two names is business. So, if you're dealing with such a big, expensive, complex business, how do you build a structure where over and over again you can replicate the way you do something? Just say, okay, I have a great idea for a movie. I'm going to go get a cast. I need to be able to be relatively certain that I'm going to be able to finance this. And so, even though it changes all the time, and even though there's new ways of doing it, and some of the studio money has dried up, there are still methodologies by which independent companies and studios can cobble together financing so that that whole end of things, as much trouble as it is, shouldn't be something that's going to make or break your movie. Now, that happens every day. Financing falls out, and people don't come through, or the guy, is like, he said he had the money, he didn't have the money. But in terms of a business model, the more sane you can keep that part of things, the more sane you can keep the lifestyles of your artists, the business model of your profession, the distribution, the marketing, all that kind of things, then the more creative you can be in the actual making of the thing, because ideally you're not worrying about that stuff. And so I say all that as blue sky because it usually doesn't work that way. But it's something that everybody aspires to, so it seemed to be worth talking about. And in America, we still have, quote, movie studios. In the old days, they were factories that hired people, made movies. They would distribute the movies, and then they owned the theaters. They don't do that anymore. They stopped owning the theaters back in the 50s. They still distribute. But if you look at today's marketplace, 2016 and moving forward, what is really the thing that a movie studio brings to the table? And I'm going to throw that out as a question. Anybody have an idea? Why do people still go to movie studios to make a movie? Anybody have any damn idea? I hear somebody saying something. No? All right. I think a bunch of you would know it already, but I'm going to tell you. Not a big secret. It's marketing. It's marketing. Because think about technology. Now, any of us, if we had access to, I don't care, your phone, anything, any decent camera, you had access to a good story, you had access to some good actors, you could make a movie. It happens. There are movies made in America where people make them on their phone. I can push one button, and I can upload it to YouTube or to iTunes or something like that. So there's production, there's distribution, there's exhibition. Why don't I just do that, and I don't need the studios at all, except for one thing. The studios market, and it's extremely expensive. It's expensive to market in America. It's expensive to market over here. Your average movie will cost more to market than it will to make, because if you put your movie up on iTunes, who's going to know? The people you email with, your family, your friends. You need to drive millions of people and make what they call impressions over and over and over again to get them to come see your movie. Interesting case in point, we recently had the president of Warner Brothers Studio join our board of trustees at ArtCenter. He's a really great guy named Greg Silverman. And he could have done any one of a number of boards, but he's kind of a design nut, and so that was a good fit. But he also said something very interesting about the film departments at ArtCenter, where he said, and I'm paraphrasing probably poorly, he said, look, let's be honest, we make great big movies, and the way we sell them is with 30-second television spots. And if those 30-second spots have beautiful imagery, if they look great, big arresting images, then it's easier to sell them. So what you guys do at ArtCenter, which is a design school, is you make movies that have beautiful visuals. He said, we value, as a studio and as an industry, what your students do. So I immediately tried to fit that on a t-shirt. It didn't fit, but I like the sentiment. Somebody else at DreamWorks said the same thing, that we have a lot of people from ArtCenter working at DreamWorks, and I was having lunch with one of their head guys a couple years ago, and he said, do you know what I like about ArtCenter Film? And I said, please tell me. I'd like to know this. And he said, you guys understand that films aren't shot anymore. They're designed. And I think that's a good point. That's certainly not exclusive to us, but the fact is, this is the coin of the realm. This is the value now of the kind of movie making that people need to do in order to separate themselves from all the noise. And so it all ties into the idea of marketing. It's like we all want to make movies that tell a great story and are intrinsically beautiful, but we also need to make movies that people go see. And so if a studio can take 50 or 100 or $200 million and throw it at marketing, and they've got something really cool looking to market, that makes everybody else's job easier. So I know you're wondering, what about your little independent film, dude? When are we going to talk about that? We're going to talk about it now. So most people here have seen the movie Rush Hour, or you're about to see the movie Skip Trace, right? Action comedy, two guys running around. At first they don't like each other, then they do. There's shooting, there's car chases, there's noise, there's jokes. Hopefully there's a good opening weekend. I love these movies. They're my favorite kind of movies. So after working in the business that I described earlier for, 20 years, I guess? Yeah, pretty much 20 years. Started in 1986 and worked until doing that, like studio development, until about 2008 when it basically died. I have a friend named Mark Dacascos. I don't know if you guys know him or not. He's Asian American actor. He's been in a lot of. He played like Wo-Fat on Hawaii Five-0, the new TV show, and I don't know if they have Iron Chef over here, but he was. And the guy's very interesting. He's multicultural and what have you, and he's been going overseas, making these movies that are kind of this hodgepodge of money from here and a director from there, and they play them over here. And he said, Ross, dude, you have to meet these guys. They're legit, and they love these kind of movies, so we should do it. So I met with a fellow from Russia who was Mr. Universe 3 times. The guy is huge. He's like, I'm 6'4". This guy's like 6'7". He's like 300 pounds. He's a big movie star over there. Speaks great English. But he wants to be a movie star all over the world. And he's been making these little movies. So he says, I like the kind of movies you make. Why don't we make one of these? He said, I know a guy who's a Russian billionaire who lives in Dubai, and he'll write a check for like a few $1 million, and we can just go make the movie. And this is a weird thing for me, because nobody just comes and says, here's the money to make the movie. They come and say, here's, a little bit of money to go write the script, and then we'll probably never make it anyway. So this started a process. This was about 2 years ago, where I said, okay, sure. This started a process where pretty early on in the middle of it, I thought, I think this is the future of making movies for all of us. Because the upside, or let's start with the downside. The downside was, we're trying to make a movie like Rush Hour, or like Lethal Weapon, or Spy, or something like that, where they have a $100 million budget. We're trying to make one of those, but we're trying to make it with $5 million. That's the downside. I think you guys already know what the upside is. Complete independence. The guy who wrote the check, very nice guy, I met him by the way. All he wanted to do was at the end of the day, get more than $5 million back. And oh, by the way, his daughter's in it. Which usually is the kiss of death, but she was terrific. She's like a singer and actress over there, so that was a huge relief. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of whether this stuff turns out good or not has to do with luck, and we were very lucky that she happened to be awesome. So anyway, if, the genie comes to you and says, do you want a lot of money, or do you want independence? Always take the independence, because it was really great. So then we started putting together an international cast and crew. The director was born in Poland. His name is Andrzej Bartkowiak. He works in America now. He was a big director of photography for many years. He shot all the Lethal Weapon movies. He shot Speed with Keanu Reeves. I think he shot 11 movies for Sidney Lumet. Very successful, always wanted to be a director. And so then he did some movies like Romeo Must Die, with Jet Li. If you guys saw that, it's actually quite good. Cradle of the Grave, what have you. So action movies, Joel Silver pictures, if you guys know who Joel Silver is. So all of a sudden now we have one American star, one Chinese American star, a bunch of money from a Russian guy in Dubai, and a Polish director. And so this is starting to get pretty interesting. So I wrote the script. Thank God it turned out good. It was pretty funny, And since you kind of know who you're going to be working with, we customized it to make it work. But another very, very interesting and germane sort of deviation from how these things usually work is when you work on a studio movie, a lot of times they're actually working backwards from a release date. So not only do you know it's going to be distributed and marketed and released, you know the day that it's going to be released. A friend of mine is working on the new Tom Cruise movie, Jack Reacher movie. They knew a year ago that it was going to come out this October. So there was no room for error here. It had to be done by October. This movie, this new movie that I'm talking about, Maximum Impact is what it's called, we don't even have a sales agent yet. So we have our money. We're going to make it as good as we possibly can, as quickly as we possibly can, for the least amount of money that we possibly can, and then we'll take it from there. So that was something that, unless there was a small sliver in the American film business of like independent films that were usually still pretty expensive because people were shooting on film, nobody did anything like that. You never like made a movie and then tried to sell it. It's completely different now. In fact, at ArtCenter, when students come in and somebody's got a great script or great idea for a script, 5 years ago I would have said, hey, write the script, go sell it to a studio. Now I say, write the script, go shoot it yourself, because studio ain't gonna buy it, especially with you as a director. So this was a big change. And so we shot the movie last year. It was shot mostly in Moscow. And that was kind of interesting because I'd never been. And, you know, you grow up in America at a certain time, and I always figured Moscow was like, you know, kind of gray and dreary, and it was like, you know, kind of poor and what have you. And they started sending these pictures back, and it's beautiful. It's like they have shopping malls and Maseratis and all these good-looking people running around. I'm like, I did not get this memo. This is amazing. So by virtue of one of the stars and the financier being from there, we did another thing that you usually don't do in American studio pictures, which is we got a lot of deals. They don't like to give studios deals because it's like, you guys just can afford it. So by virtue of asking nicely, basically, they were able to get a free helicopter, a free landing in an airstrip. They got a free military jet that landed, like a cargo jet. And they're like, yeah, just give us gas money. We got these free locations all over the place. They basically, unlike in America, I don't know how it is here, but in America, you got to get a permit to shoot. You have to be very careful. It costs a fortune because you'll block off the streets. Over there, they're like, oh, you guys want to do a car chase and a shootout? All right, you know, just do it over there and have a party. And at one point, they have like street cleaners that have water coming out of them, and they said, can we have that in the shot? And the guy said, yeah, sure. You want to like run into it? The water hit your car? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, okay, just don't bang it up too much, I'll get in trouble. So whole different kind of filmmaking, and probably the future of filmmaking. So, but do stay safe when you do this. So this experience, which is now in the post-production phase, has been extremely informative for somebody like me, if for no other reason than it proved that I never viewed movies as the kind of endeavor where you could just go out and do it. It always seemed too big to me because the kind of movies I worked on were too big for somebody to do it. But now we're in a position where we can do it, and for those of you who want to do it, this is what I suggest. And you have to be careful. You have to obviously, you know, what's the word I think would be the customize or modulate the kind of movie that you're able to make. I mean, we did an action comedy because we had people working with us who knew how to do this stuff, and we, you know, who could do it safely and quickly, and they had a lot of cameras. And so starting out, maybe not such a good idea because you don't want to end up getting hurt. But it was a big life lesson because it taught me that we can do these things now that we couldn't do before. And we now have the world as our marketplace because if they're done the right way about people who we can identify with, then why wouldn't they play all over the place? So I'm going to ask for if there's any questions while I proceed. I'm going to switch gears, talk about a little something else, and then I'm going to leave. Anybody have any? I know we have a Q&A later on, but you're a bunch of professionals. Any questions so far about any of this? That's good. So either I make complete sense or you're just going, "Oy, this guy." So I kind of left you with a little bit of a cliffhanger there, no pun intended, which is making a movie about the right thing. And that's probably the hardest part of it all. Is that first decision. Many years ago, I got to work with a director named Billy Wilder, which some of you people may know. And in my opinion, he's the greatest screenwriter who ever lived. He was from Austria, fled the Nazis, came to the United States, made movies like Some Like It Hot, Double Indemnity. The list goes on and on. The guy was a genius. And he said, which I'm now going to say to you, which I definitely believe, it's better to do a bad job on a good idea than a great job on a bad idea. So the number one choice of making a movie is, what's it going to be about? Why would we care? Who's going to go see this thing? And I don't say that in terms of like anticipating the marketplace. I say that in terms of, does it mean anything to you? Because if it means something to you, then it probably means something to everybody else. And that raises a whole lot of interesting questions, which we've all been thinking about a lot. I know I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think everybody in the film business has been thinking about it a lot, because like with this thing that I made with the Russian billionaire's money, our intention from day one was for that to play in as many countries as possible. We have an international cast. But the story itself, the characters themselves, we tried to engineer them to be people that we all kind of can relate to and understand and root for. And I don't think this is an original idea, but it's certainly a compelling idea, which is that a lot is made about cultural differences. A lot is made, in my country, we're always talking about diversity and inclusion and what have you. And movies like Rush Hour, obviously, and many, many other movies, depend on cultural differences. They tend to depend on how one person sees something one way and one person sees something the other way. And that's great, and that exists. But what's really interesting, and what people don't seem to be talking about, in my opinion, enough, is that if there's a percentage scale, 100%, from 100 to 0, and we talk about people have way more in common than they don't have in common. And it's kind of crazy, I think, when you really start thinking about it, how little cultural differences are to people's emotions and makeup and worldview compared to just being a human person. And if we can get in touch with the similarities of people in our own minds, what we all have in common. We all laugh at things, we all cry at things, we all smile at things. Usually we laugh at this, at jokes. They may be different just because of setups and what have you, but there are things we find funny. One thing that I don't know, I'll have to ask you guys whether this is a universal thing. I think it is, which is really interesting, is everybody I've ever met roots for the underdog. They root for the little guy. We're always, if we see a movie, no matter what it is about the movie Rocky, or whatever, think of a million movies where think about Shrek. Shrek's the underdog. We all identify with them. And I always imagine myself, all right, well, let's say like the richest guy in the world, right? Bill Gates. Does he sit at home, he's a billionaire, and root for the underdog? He's not an underdog, but I bet he does. So that's really interesting. So I think everybody does themselves a disservice if they only think about what's different. We use that for comedic effect or for dramatic effect because that's a good thing because it gives you conflict, it gives you comedy. But I'm betting on the similarities that all people have in terms of what we all aspire to and what is meaningful to all of us as the not-so-secret formula to making movies and telling stories that appeal to everybody in the world. And I think if you can do that, then it doesn't really matter what the person on screen looks like or what language they're speaking or where their movie's set, because I've seen movies set all over the world with people from different nationalities who look different and sound different and what have you, but they're aspiring to the same sorts of things that we aspire to. So when you're thinking about your movies, look inside yourself. Just go, what's important to me in the big picture? Because that's probably going to be important to everybody else. And I remember a friend of mine who was working with Warren Beatty said he's an American movie star and been in a lot of good movies. He's got a new one coming out. And he said he would never make a movie unless it was about what he called one of the universal themes, love, death, revenge. Revenge is something we can all identify with, redemption, all these sorts of things that what's the word, they go beyond cultural differences and what have you. So it's a really big philosophical thing to think about, but it's really not that hard because you think about what's important to you, what's important to your family, what's important to your friends, what's important to life, what are the big issues. And I think if we can do that, then have some fun or have some conflict, some drama with the differences in people and the differences in the world, then all of a sudden you're going to be telling stories that could be said anywhere, and people are going to go, yeah, I like that. I know this person. I know where they're coming from. I know what they want. I identify with this person. I'm rooting for this person. I want to see this movie. I don't care if it's subtitled. I don't care if the person in the movie doesn't look like me, because they kind of are me, because we have the same concerns. So does that make sense to everybody? Because it kind of makes sense to me. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think it also applies to every movie. It doesn't just have to be a drama or an action movie. I think it kind of applies to everything, because we all have those things in common. We're all kind of scared of the same things. The boogeyman, it's like, or whatever, lights off. Lights out. They got a movie now about you turn the lights out, you see somebody. It's scary. You don't need to, like in any language, I turn the lights out, I see some lady standing in the doorway, it's going to scare the hell out of me. I don't care what she looks like. So I strongly recommend for anybody, trying to follow this advice myself, for anybody who's endeavoring to make a worldwide movie, make a movie that means something to you, and hopefully you will end up with a worldwide movie. So, in conclusion, I'm going to give you one more little piece of writer's advice here, because now we just talked about the big ideas of like how you engineer a movie to appeal to everybody and what have you. I'm going to end with a pet peeve of mine, which is that when you're going to make a movie that has a hero and he's going to do something, make sure you give him him or her, the requisite skills to be able to do this. So, for instance, if you're doing a big action movie and if somebody needs to save the world, it probably shouldn't be your doctor or your accountant or your grandma, because she's not going to have the ability to do this. Part of while you're thinking about what's my story, who are my characters, what's it all about, make it believable for us. Always give the person the right skills. Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker were police. They knew this stuff. Die Hard, he was a cop. It made sense. So please do that. And I say it only because I've read so many scripts where I completely don't believe that this person is doing what they're able to do. So put that in your little writer bag of tricks. So I'd like to thank you all for your attention. It's great being here. This is my first time in China. It's awesome. I'm so coming back. And I really look forward to working with Chinese film people in America and here. It's a good thing. Thank you.
At this point, I would like to invite Karen Fu to the stage, the CEO of the very creative and visionary Huatzi Group.
尊敬的各位在座的老师，大家好，我是华策集团的付冰心。我们这次也是非常感谢 ArtCenter 中国能促成华策集团与 ArtCenter 美国这次的整体的这个 forum 的举办。正如刚才 Mark 校长所描述的。3个月前，赵总带领我们去美国，进行了访问学习，然后我们的确被 ArtCenter 学生的，可以用一个词来描述，就是震撼。那我们希望能够把这样子带给 震撼的、创意的，更多学校的一个交流的一个机会，能够带来给我们中国的创意的同行来相互来交流、相互来学习。所以这次也是我们跟 ArtCenter 合作的这个主要的一个目的。我们相信跟 ArtCenter 的合作是一个比较长远的一个战略的一个计划。那我们希望我们能够做非常的初始的，这个合作的源头开始就是人才的一个培养，所以这次也是我们决定出资200万来甄选这个中国的有创意的年轻的学生或者是同行的有创意的人才来资助去 ArtCenter 进行编导、视觉特效设计各个系的一个这样子的一个学习的这样的一个机会，也是为了希望将来学成之后能够回归到中国，为中国的电影做出更多的国际化升级的自己的一些付出和贡献。
Now please join me to welcome the president of HUATSE Group, Mr. Zhao Yifang, and also Ms. Yu Lan. 好的，我们请我们工作人员把我们这个笔拿上来。对，我们首先有请我们4位在我们的定制场记板上签名。Please take a signature on all this score. 哇，我看到我们4位嘉宾已经在这个场记板上签名。那接下来我们也一起有请4位嘉宾为我们打响我们的电影场记板，正式的开启我们华策集团和 ACCD 的产业合作，好不好？我们倒数3、2、1，好吗 ？Let's count down. 3, 2, 1。再次恭喜我们华策集团和我们 ACCD 达成这次产业合作，也希望我们这次合作能够培养出更优秀的电影人才。那既然我们的赵总裁已经在我们台上了，我们也来问一下好不好？对于这一次和 ACCD 的合作，我们华策是有怎样的一些规划？
非常感谢ArtCenter所有的这个教授们、贵宾们来到中国，跟我们中国的电影的这个各个方面的团队和人才进行交流。我想这个世界应该是因创意而美丽。因创新而进步，电影可能也是这样的本质。所以，作为华策这样的一个电影企业和一个影视内容企业，希望在这里能够做出我们的努力。也希望我们在座的各位，我们能够一起去分享我们未来的这个创意和创新的对人类带来的力量，和对中国电影带来的进步，和对于我们每一个中国人和每一个电影人带来的这个未来的很多可以分享的东西。所以呢，也是很感谢我们中国的所有的电影人和电影的朋友们能够信任和支持华策一路往前，也感谢ArtCenter能够这一次能够成全我们共同的这样的合作。谢谢，谢谢。